Take it away. Okay, I'm Paulette Feraria, lecturer in language, literature, and literacy education at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. And this research, as you see, it is titled Backyard Tesol. And if we can take any indication from how it is written, it's already sending a message that we're talking about challenging the kind of Eurocentric notions about second language teaching, ESL, EFL, anything at all that's called teaching English to speakers of other languages that have thrown our language educators into a quandary. Because as we know, most of that has been prescribed with, with the deficit ideologies that we need to perhaps apply a corrective measure, in teaching of English. And so a lot of time is spent on looking at the problems associated with the Creole languages of the English-speaking Caribbean that are so close to the target language that they pose a particular challenge for teachers. But my research is focusing, veering away from problems, orientation towards solutions-oriented praxis and possibilities for change that empower teachers to grow their own research and practice for international context. And so what we talk about now, how do we do this? How do we cultivate backyard research? So of course, the backyard is suggesting the professional space that you know so well. And if at all we can stretch it, it might just be in the Caribbean yard space as well. And this calls for developing new dispositions about our practice. The first thing we have to do is employ critical dissonance, which is the ability to step back and question what we currently do. Why is it that we are so caught up in searching for, let us teach English as a second language, but we know absolutely no way in how we can do that because we still revert to the problems associated with the two languages which are so close. And so the whole idea is to do that kind of self-dialogue that begins the kind of interrogation about what it is that we do. And it is this interrogation with self, the self-dialogue, that shapes our focus to see our practice as opportunities for inquiry and intervention and experiment. And so the whole concept of growing a homegrown Tesol pedagogy came out of the desire for us to be more self-sufficient, to strive towards looking into our own classroom practice to see if we can get ideas about what it is that meets our unique standards. And so I have employed two main strategies in my own research. In fact, these two things characterize whatsoever I do in my teacher education training program at the University of the West Indies. Number one, making the familiar strange to see differently. Now, this is the idea of your backyard, which is so close to us. Our professional space is so close to us that sometimes we tend to spend a lot of time focusing on the challenges that students have and not recognizing that the same students have opportunities that can really allow them to experience English language teaching in unique ways. And so the second position is moving from this is what we are to do, this prescriptive ideology, towards what I call a what if disposition about my practice. The what if, I think, leaves the space open for the kind of talks that can engage us in looking in to see how we can create that kind of difference. And my teachers, educators who are involved in the Masters in Education program at the campus, they are nurturing what I call post-method paradigm sensibilities. And so their teachers talk about Tesol. It's not about methods. In fact, it's beyond methods. It's building what we call a post-method sensibility that focuses on the particularity of our educational context, our community context, our countries, and in fact, that what it is that makes us particular and unique, and to see that as something to celebrate and not to see it as a problem that hinders any kind of method or pedagogy. And we move into this practicality in terms of having our students engage in doing and using English rather than learning about English and and getting into notions that, oh, I'll never get this right. And this whole corrective, approach that stifles the whole notion of using English, putting English to use in real life and authentic context. And so this is giving birth to what we call pedagogies of possibilities. Now, a part of this process that engages teachers in talking about their practice, it's not just mere talk. The whole notion of giving voice and occupying, it is central to the kind of subversive ways in which we give voice to the teachers who I call the subaltern of research. A lot of outside researchers, research teachers, they inquire about their practice, they look into their classrooms, but they never engage in the kind of collaborative research that give teachers voice to what they do every day in their own classroom practice. So they're in their own backyard, and they cannot develop a pedagogy about that, because much of the research is looking for the problems students are having with the language, the whole corpus, the whole grammar, the issues of spelling and this, and not recognizing the opportunities for what we call more utilitarian and purposeful use of language. And so the Occupy, it's about a place-based pedagogy that involves the teachers occupying a new space that gives them voice. And perhaps this is mainstream research. Maybe this space is a professional learning community or a kind of discourse community that gives them the opportunity to, interrogate self, question, explore, and examine ways of knowing and doing. And so I have borrowed this mantra from Television Jamaica: looking in, looking out, looking better. And it is this looking in and looking out towards betterness that empowers teachers as innovators of their own classroom teaching experience, that empowers them as researchers, not just subjects to be researched, but the actual instigators of their own research, and privileging this whole reflective disposition that leads towards the professional knowledge space and broadening their own understanding of the nature of English language teaching in the Caribbean. And the next point I want to raise is that these what-if dispositions that I speak about, I have translated them in my own practice. I can think of two in particular that shaped an innovative intervention that has reaped tremendous benefits in our second language classroom. I asked, what if I were to integrate radio into my classroom teaching at the University of the West Indies? Would it facilitate the knowing, making English more audible and visible? Would it generate input, English input, in a Creole speaking environment? And the other thing I asked myself, if I were to engage my teachers in teacher constructed theories that allow them to interrogate the very curriculum that the ministry gives them to teach, to allow them to recognize that that's just a guide, but they can also question it and seek opportunities for experimenting, for intervening in the whole classroom practice, so that they can develop the kind of praxis that leads to students building and taking ownership of their own learning, and to empower teachers in a way to allow them to recognize the autonomy that they have, and to shape the pedagogies that impact their own classroom rather than relying on those that have been prescribed for them. And so I'm going to share two of the research that, the snapshots from those research that we theorized about. So we launched the UWI English Olympiad on News Talk 93 FM, our university radio. The mantra of the intervention was targeting English for global communications. And the research involved a pilot with 20 secondary schools in Jamaica. And, you know, and we also having that professional space which allows our graduates at the university in Jamaica to merge with those graduates who are teaching English in Japan and Colombia and all across the world. They too were engaged in this intervention in their own way. And what you see on the screen are 2 of the Jamaican projects that came out of the 20 projects. And I want you to take notice that the teachers began with envisioning a pedagogy of possibility by theorizing in a creative way. They employed, you know, metaphors, because, you know, as language teachers, we have that creative arts-based background as well. And so they brought that to the education space. And so one particular school that has an auto mechanic business that where they serve the community as a way of giving their students hands-on experience with the discipline that they're pursuing. They decided to launch a whole school intervention that dubbed English the engine that drives the business of auto mechanics. And this intervention involved the business group, the language group, those doing auto mechanics, and it's amazing the kind of writing and speaking opportunities, the opportunities for putting English to use in real life, purposeful and meaningful context that generated from that school. And the second school, they are really the guru for sports. And they talk about sports every day and their performance on the track. And so they came up with what they dubbed sports journalism, passing the baton of English for global communications. And it was amazing to see the sports magazine that they created, how they prepared a magazine program that allowed them to talk about their school success on radio, how they were able to build, you know, the sports journalism, the writing for the media, and, you know, blogs, everything you can imagine that allowed the students to write about their experiences in the thing that their school excelled in, which was sports or auto mechanics. And on the other side of the screen, you will see 2 international class projects that I am particularly impressed with, because both have been published, you know, in 2019 in a book that talks about post-method paradigms. One Jamaican teacher decided that she was going to create a Jamaican corner in her Virginian classroom for a multilingual group that shared one thing in common, their knowledge of Bob Marley, our reggae icon and guru. They just wanted to hear more about Bob, more about our country. And so she built that classroom space that facilitated opportunities for students to talk and to share what it was like in their country, just exchanging different cultural things that they would do. A very powerful space that is still erected in that classroom even after the research, because of the success that they had with that. And the ambassador of English, that's another writing research that came out of it. I don't know if I'm getting the signal for wrapping up. But
wrap up, but you're about 3 minutes over.
Okay, so I'm wrapping up to say that it's the context particular, achievement, success driven and participatory based performance that characterizes pedagogy. And of course, it's the hindsight, the insight, the foresight that takes us to this notion that we can grow our own research for sustainability. And my last slide is one of the topics from another project, Reaping What We Sow, Voice in Print and English for Export, which a school did in order to do their own research in the UWI English Olympiad. Thank you for listening to me. And I was overcome with my passion, as you can see, because backyard Tesol is something I believe in and practice. Thank you very much.